Welcome to Eurofins Viracor Clinical Diagnostics Podcast, where I'll be sharing up-to-date scientific advances, key diagnostic testing, and our most recent innovations. Welcome to our podcast. This is our fourth year hosting our live in-booth interview show, Transplant Radio. Our aim is to connect with the transplant community, a diverse group that includes professionals, donors, patients, and even doctors who are also recipients. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, you can find our email in the episode summary. Amplify your influence on Transplant Radio. Enjoy episode 3 of our 15-part series.
So, I'm Rob Harrell with Viracor here today with Patricia Draper from Gift of Life. And it's an organization that we're quite fond of, and I understand that they're quite fond of us as well. So today we're going to have the opportunity to talk a little bit specifically about what Patty does. And I thought we would start out by just having her tell us a little bit about what brought her to the point where she decided that, hey, I want to be a part of Gift of Life.
Sure.
There's something here that I can do, and I have a calling.
Yeah.
So what brought you to Gift of Life?
Yeah. So my background is as a licensed clinical social worker, and I first started out in the hospitals working in an ICU environment. I was on more of the donor side of things, and I got to just observe and participate in a lot of end-of-life conversations that did result in people being able to give the gift of life and be organ donors. My husband received a transfer for his job. We moved from Denver to Kansas City, and I started working at St. Luke's Hospital of Kansas City as a liver and kidney transplant social worker. I did that for about 8 years, and through my work at St. Luke's, I would often refer patients to the Transplant Mentors program. I also did some volunteer work for the Gift of Life for some of their really fun events, and some of the physicians I worked with were on the board. So I had the pleasure of interacting with Gift of Life on a lot of different planes. My husband had played in the golf tournament, all sorts of stuff. So when the manager of the Transplant Mentors program, who was really just a legend in his own right, Andy Donnelly, he was a liver transplant recipient and really drummed up a ton of awareness and a ton of goodwill for the Transplant Mentors program in Kansas City locally. He decided to step away from work for a time, and so I was kind of approached with the opportunity, and I decided to apply, and I've been happy there ever since.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your perspectives on the overall mission of Gift of Life,
Sure.
And then we'll drill in particularly into the mentorship program.
Totally. So, the mission of Gift of Life is to, see transplant needs met throughout the country and throughout all types of environments in transplant, whether that's on the organ donation side, increasing awareness and educating people about what it means to be an organ tissue donor, and also helping them to see what transplantation looks like in the real world. All of the education we do through our Lifesavers program is done by people who have a firsthand connection to transplant. I think that's truly what makes us unique. We're encouraging high school students to leave our presentations where they've learned the facts about transplantation and organ donation, and they've heard a really interesting story about someone's life and their transplant experience, whether it's their child receiving a liver transplant when they were 11 months old, which is the story of our founder, Nate and Kim Harbour. And then they can kind of put the pieces together, right? It's real, it happens, you don't see it, but transplant when done well it's invisible, right? Someone is doing well and they're healthy. And so it gives young adults some information when they're first being approached for that conversation. And we encourage them to go home, have a conversation with their families, and just kind of talk about what they learned and what it all means.
Right.
In the Transplant Mentors program, we're able to support the transplant community and transplant recipients and living donors in a kind of a different way. All of our transplant mentors that are enrolled in our program are solid organ transplant recipients or living donors and their respective care partners, and they are at least 1 year out of their transplant, and they've kind of come either recommended or endorsed by their home transplant center. We have them go through some very basic training, things like listening skills, how to be available for hearing big, hard things, and how to share your story without overpowering. I would say the number one thing that we encourage and really drill down on is we don't want our mentors to be giving medical advice. We absolutely want them to be sharing their experience and guiding conversations with maybe their mentees' providers, but we really make sure that medical advice is not part of it. We're very mindful of our scope of practice in that way. We're there for encouragement, support, education, and that insight that only another transplant patient can give. And so to that end, that's how we support the recipient community or living donors.
Yeah. It's awesome work. I don't know if you actually attended the keynote that just happened today to hear Dr. Tudorov talk about what's going on in Ukraine.
We had the pleasure of speaking to them at our booth yesterday for like 45 minutes, and they were amazing.
I mean, it's difficult enough to have a transplant and go through that journey here in the United States.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine what they're doing right now in Ukraine?
It's impossible to imagine.
It is. It's very difficult to imagine. So what you do specifically is you're the director of the mentorship program.
Yeah.
How is that expanding? How do you see it expanding or evolving? What are you thinking about 2, 3, 5 years down the road in terms of what it will look like? What does it look like today?
Sure.
And where do you want to take it?
So I would say when I kind of took over the program, we had obviously originally we were very engaged with our local transplant centers in the Kansas City area. In 2020, as you know, the world shut down. I was working in the hospital at the time, and I will tell you, thinking about that time, it was kind of surreal. Taking care of patients, and they're all alone, and you're just trying to guide them through this difficult process. It also made it difficult for programs like the Transplant Mentors program to engage with staff and encourage referrals because, they were really just doing their best to get the work done. But Gift of Life was very smart, and then they took that time to build a roster of hospitals where they wanted to seek engagement. And so when I came on in 2023, in January of 2023, they had already kind of established a good rapport with many more hospitals outside the Kansas City metro region and outside the Midwest, actually. So at that time, there were about roughly 20 hospitals referring on a regular basis. Since that time, last year we received referrals from 37 hospitals, and if you count all of our mentors, we represent last year 47 transplant programs that were either their patients were enrolled as mentors or their patients were seeking mentorship. So we see the program growing and expanding. Right now, we are really focusing on making a very specific curriculum and education for our living donor mentors. So we make sure that, as you know, there's never enough transplants to go around, right? Which is why we're surrounded by all this amazing technology and things to optimize transplants or things to do stem cells or, xenotransplantation. All these things are such amazing science. But one thing we know is that living donation is also a really good option for many patients. We want to support the living donor community through giving them their own mentorship, making sure that the manual and preparation for our training program for those individuals who are living donors is really up to par and relevant for them.
Some of those living donor stories are incredible.
They certainly are.
If you ever go to any of the events where they're getting together with the folks that they have given a
it's very moving.
Very, very moving.
Yes.
Unreal stories.
Yeah.
And they are in it together, obviously, as well. That was one of the things that was incredibly touching about Tudorov's presentation today when they talked about the physician whose son had passed away who gave a heart, and she went in to talk to the recipient.
Wow.
Gave the recipient her son's favorite animal. But when we were standing here earlier, you were talking about how in your own personal life, you walk the walk with a very great group of friends.
Yeah.
How do you think about what's the real purpose of the mentor in the end when you train these folks up?
Sure.
You say, hey, this is what success really looks like in the role that you're playing. Aside from the fact that, yes, I'm like, you shouldn't give medical advice.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Well, I guess when I am speaking with someone who is seeking mentorship, I want to have an understanding of what their needs are. And every patient is different. Some people want to hear, yes, you can still run a marathon after transplant. And other patients want to hear, what is life really like? Or do I really have to give up sushi forever? Or even things that might seem silly to someone, but it's an incredible change and in your lifestyle. And it really is, I would tell my patients all the time that transplant's not a cure. For your organ failure, it's simply the best available treatment, and you will always be, to some degree, engaging in medical care. Mm-hmm. So it really is chronic disease management, which for many patients feels like a bit of a burst their bubble, because there is some idea sometimes that like, oh, I'll just get my transplant and then everything will be wonderful. Mm-hmm. And as much as I wish that were true, we know as transplant professionals that it's a lifelong journey to take care of your health, because you will always be a little bit sicker than the average bear. So the thing that I'm always looking for when making a mentor connection is giving them a voice that sounds familiar. I really want to make sure that I'm not just matching people based on, oh, well, you need a kidney transplant, and I have this mentor, Brad, he also needs a kidney transplant. Y'all will connect well, and just leave it at that. No, I like to get to know my mentors. I like to, we have the way that we interact with them and record their mentor profiles. We have a very good understanding of what motivates them, what their specific coping skills are, and how they find relaxation and joy in life. So we can match them up with people who also are motivated by the same things, and that, like I said, that voice that sounds familiar. So it's very funny. I've been able to match people. I have a funny story about a woman who lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and she mentored a woman in New York City. And at first I thought, well, they connect on a lot of things. Of course, there's a lot of difference between Omaha and New York, but I think they'll hit it off. Well, I got a email a few months later that said, thank you so much for matching me with Grace. I actually went and met her. She works in the Empire State Building, and I got a special tour. And so I get to hear those kind of fun stories all the time of sometimes our mentors have like a 1 or 2 touch base conversation and they get their question answered. But really more often they really develop this kind of fun friendship and fellowship. I think that transplantation is very unique. Of course, there's so much medicine involved and science, but there's also a little bit of magic. And I feel like transplantation is an extremely existential experience. The transfer of life from one person to another is just something to be in awe of. But it also, for a lot of recipients, is something that sometimes triggers some feelings of guilt, feelings of difficulty, hoping for your transplant, knowing that, your transplantation will be the result maybe of someone's death, and that while you are having maybe the best day of your life, someone else is having a truly awful time coping with grief. And so it's not just a pill that comes from a factory or a joint that's built somewhere. It really is something different and special. And so the emotional and psychosocial part of transplantation cannot be understated.
Right. That's amazing. So I'm assuming, I don't know the mentorship program in depth, but I'm assuming you have family members of deceased donors in there as well.
Do you know what? All of our people are on the recipient side. The organ procurement organization in our area, Midwest Transplant Network, we're so happy to be able to let them handle the donor side of things. They have amazing programs for donor families, deceased donor families, so that they can engage and they can remain a part of the transplant community. They do it so well. That's not a space we get involved in. Obviously, it's kind of since they're in charge of going through the organ procurement process with the patient and their family, they just maintain that relationship.
So you mentioned in the very beginning that you come alongside everybody in transplant. So you also mentor practitioners, you mentor patients, caregivers, all the above?
We don't have any physician mentorship or anything like that, though that would be a really interesting concept. All of our mentors are transplant recipients, their respective care partners, so people that were helping them through their transplant journey, usually a spouse or a family member, a friend, and then living donors. So like I said, the living donor population is really unique because most of the time we're encountering living donors in the pre-transplant phase of care, people who are maybe wanting to decide if living donation is right for them, and again, see it in the wild, see it in real life. You know, if you're walking around the grocery store, there's no way you would know, oh, that person donated a kidney, but we can connect you with someone if you want to learn more about it. You know, as a transplant professional, I would always say I was part of maybe thousands of transplants and had the pleasure of helping patients in that way, but I've never had a transplant and neither has anyone in my family. So my knowledge has a limit, right? And so we are hoping to enhance and assist the transplant centers and patients in that education piece, making sure that they can see a real world example of what transplantation looks like and what life after transplant can look like. Because a lot of times people are good and sick and they feel a little bit hopeless, maybe down, maybe unsure. It feels like a big undertaking. When you go in for your transplant evaluation, they give you gobs and gobs of information, which is wonderful and necessary, absolutely, but it gets to be a little overwhelming. Sometimes by the time the patients would get to me, they would just have this big deer in the headlights look, and I would be like, all right, let's just take a breath, answer some questions. And so that's what's nice is even when I would meet with patients as a transplant social worker, I would always ask them to assess their level of understanding. You know, have you ever met someone who's had a transplant? Have you ever seen transplant in real life? And most of the time the answer was no, unless they had a genetic condition or something that had impacted other family members. We would often hear, well, I go to church with this guy. I think he had a transplant a couple years ago, but not really any close connection there. So that's a wonderful time to offer the opportunity for transplant mentorship. Some people don't feel like it's necessary, but a lot of people have a curiosity like, oh, okay, yes, I do want to talk to someone. I want to learn more about what real life looks like after transplant.
Right. I keep coming, as I'm hearing you talk, and as we were talking earlier, I keep coming back to that song, we get by with a little help from our friends.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the practitioner that is going to be your physician through the journey, they will want to give you help. They always
Absolutely.
do. You've got a caregiver that cares, and they're going to give you help.
Yeah.
But there's just, to me, it seems like something very special about somebody who's been there, done that.
Totally.
And wants to help you through it, too.
Transplantation is truly a team sport. If you look at even just the requirements of what all goes into a transplant evaluation, you're really looking at the whole person and utilizing a big team of professionals, not just surgeons and physicians, but also pharmacists, dietitians, financial coordinators, social workers. These are all necessary things to review during a transplant evaluation. So when we say that transplant affects your whole life, it truly does. And it's such a responsibility for transplant programs to make sure that they're being good stewards of the gift of an organ donation, knowing that these things are very precious, valuable resources. The transplant program has a huge responsibility to the donor. And, so in going through that process, you want to make sure that you're addressing every single need. Because if we're going to optimize the experience you have, and if we're going to make sure that you have the best possible outcome, it's important to not just look at those clinical measures, but to look at quality of life measures as well. I would always tell my patients that the whole point of transplant is to extend and improve your quality of life. And that's the goal.
It has been very impressive to me, having attended a number of these events now over the years, to hear how much attention is being given to patient surveys, following up, right?
Absolutely.
To see how they're doing, what's their biggest struggles.
Yeah.
So when you pair folks up with a mentor, is there a length of time that you ask them to try to stay together? What's the average? How long do people typically say, yeah, I'm in this for 6 months, a year, I'm in it for a lifetime with this person?
Yeah.
Sounds like you've had friendships that have developed in forever.
It really depends on when they engage with us. If someone is first seeking mentorship at the very beginning of their transplant journey, sometimes that can take months or years to get a transplant, especially when you're speaking about a kidney transplant. You may be waiting for years on dialysis or otherwise. So we make sure that the people seeking mentorship are aware that this can be something you can pick up and put down as needed, that your mentor remains available to you. So let's say I receive a referral for someone and they just went to their initial education day. Their nurse emailed me and said, Sarah had a really great visit. She needs a liver transplant. She would like to talk to someone else. So I call Sarah. I talk to her about her needs. I go through my roster of mentors. I reach out to them and say, hey, is now a good time for you to mentor Sarah? They say yes, and I go ahead and make that connection. And then they really take it from there. Sometimes, like I said, it's a 1 or 2 time interaction. They just want some basic questions answered. But if we're meeting Sarah at the beginning of her transplant journey in the evaluation phase, she might have questions about that. And then maybe then she gets listed and she gets her first false alarm call and she feels a little upset or frustrated or like she really just needs someone to talk to. She can pick up that mentor again, interact, get, have that good quality experience. And then let's say she's a couple days post-transplant and probably she wants to share the news of what's going on with her mentor. And then of course there's a whole other host of things that she's experiencing that maybe not anticipated, or maybe they were and they're better or worse than she anticipated. And there's an opportunity for more conversation there. So we never restrict the amount of time. If anything, I ask them to at some point formally end the transplant mentor relationship if they're gonna just go on some like buddy journey together, just so it's like, okay, well, the gift of life, part of this is closed. Now y'all are just friends. And also then the mentor doesn't have to keep like reporting their volunteer hours to me. We ask all of our mentors to record their volunteer hours because it's really important when we're applying for grants or things like this to reflect just how much work our volunteers do, because it is tremendous.
Right. You keep talking about how the patient has a certain responsibility when you create this mentorship.
Sure.
What kind of responsibility do you feel for it going off really, really well? And how do your mentors also have embrace that same sense of responsibility?
Yeah, I think a lot. It feels a bit of it like a matchmaking process almost. I kind of pride myself on being able to assess and evaluate people and their needs. I think it's important to establish a good rapport, let them understand me and my goals, and that helps me understand them and their goals. And so when making a mentor connection, it is very important to me that it's a high quality connection. Like I said, they're finding that familiar voice and they're enjoying it. Mm-hmm. I always tell people, if for some reason Sarah, if I match you with Linda and for some reason it's not a good vibe, you let me know where the gaps are and we'll figure it out. I have a whole list of people that would be happy to mentor you.
And I'm assuming that goes both ways. Sometimes the mentor might...
Absolutely. And that's also why I ask the mentor before I kind of engage them. I say, is now a good time for you to mentor someone? As we know, the transplant journey can be bumpy. And if someone's not feeling very optimistic or up for chatting, that's okay. They don't have to engage every time I ask them to.
Yeah.
There are some times if you were to ask me for parenting advice, I would give you maybe a not so, I would give you a more frustrated answer. On other days, I might be welcome and open to giving, advice on some topic I know, But so I think it's, transplant patients, like everyone, they go through seasons with this chronic disease management. Mm-hmm. I would say far and away, my mentors are always pretty willing to engage. But, it's not uncommon for patients to have health complications in the post-transplant setting. And, I can think of a gentleman, Stan, who does a lot of mentoring for me, and I emailed him and say, hey Stan, is now a good time? And he said, I'm getting some skin cancer zapped on my forehead, and then I'm gonna be kind of out of pocket because I'm going on a trip with my kids. Now's not a good time, so I'll just come back to Stan later.
Right.
Yeah.
So as those mentors themselves begin to become really great at what it is that they do you expand the number of relationships that they have, or do they always have just one going on at a time formally?
It really depends on the needs of the person seeking mentorship. Some people are really excellent at certain things, or maybe not. So I try very much to share the wealth, though. All of our mentors I am endlessly impressed by. They volunteer their time to continue to give back to a community where they feel they've been given so much. And also, they're still engaging years and years and years after their transplant, which is really unique. And they're so happy to do it. Like, they get, if anything, I hear feedback, I wish I had more opportunities to mentor, which is why we come to things like this and make sure that people are aware of the resource and that people are using the resource. It's certainly, there's so much going on in a transplant evaluation. Sometimes these like softer things get lost in the mix. So we just like to offer a reminder and say like, hey, don't forget about us. We're here. This resource is here, and we're happy to have you use us. It's also really nice to acknowledge your patients that are further along in their transplant journey. So like I said, all of our transplant mentors are at least 1 year out from their transplant experience. This is an excellent way for you to acknowledge and honor patients who you have seen doing well. And people are very touched and very excited. Transplantation, like I said, lasts forever, right? So this idea that you want to still be a part of the community and kind of share what you know is just really special.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The idea that this sense of responsibility is something that gives you this sense to give back to the community as well.
Yes.
You have a responsibility to maintain your health in the best way possible because you've been given the gift of life.
Absolutely.
But to give it back to the community for the folks that are called to do that, I think it's just awesome.
One step further.
So now you're really expanding, circle back to this, you're really expanding the living donor mentorship program. How many folks do you have in that right now, or is it just being developed, and how do you see that growing?
I would say our living donor mentorship is upwards of maybe 20, 25 kidneys, and our liver living donor mentorship roster is quite a bit smaller, just about 4 people now. So again, these are things we're looking to grow, and it's a bit of a mixed bag because it can be difficult to reach out to transplant centers and say, we want to help you, but also, can you also recommend some mentors? So it's nice because it helps build a relationship with a program if they know their patients are enrolled and engaged. So that's all part of engaging new hospitals. And not every transplant center does living liver donor. That's obviously, percentage-wise quite a bit less. So the referrals are less, so our mentors are less, but again, this is something we're looking to build and continue to grow.
So if people are hearing this and they're interested, how do they reach out, contact you, connect with you, and become a mentor?
Sure. So our website is giftdonor.org, and you can follow the links there. You can also reach out via email. The email for the Transplant Mentors program is just that, transplantmentors@giftdonor.org.
And then you're here at the show. Where is your booth?
We are in booth 105, kind of over in the corner. You can notice us by the big butterfly flag.
Which I'm going to come get my butterfly pin shortly hereafter.
Yes. We have some fun butterfly lapel pins that people have been enjoying. Is
there anything that I didn't ask that you really wanted, as you're here on the radio and here on X right now, you have the opportunity to share that you really wanted to share?
I think I would just say that, there's a lot of dialogue around transplantation and around organ donation. And I would just encourage people to remember that organ donation is truly one of the most selfless acts that people can engage in, whether it's as a living donor or at the time of their death, making sure that they are, extending and improving someone else's life, even in a very difficult time for their family and at the end of their life. I think that the professionals that surround this community work very hard to honor that gift gift, to be respectful of what we are all encountering, that we are encountering something that is very precious and that we are privileged to get to work on behalf of these patients. So I would just encourage people to remember that there is a great deal of reverence given, and that these gifts are valuable.
That's amazing. When Sharon and I were talking the other day, at some point in time, she kept bringing up hope. And I had been referring routinely to this gift of life as hope. When I was talking to Michelle about it, mistakenly, errantly, I kept saying the gift of hope, right?
Oh, sure.
Not the gift of life. But in truth, that's a big part of it.
Yes.
You're giving someone hopefully a lot more years, like some of the folks we've heard about here.
Absolutely.
Their experiences.
And sometimes seeing someone else accomplish your goal does give you hope. You know, when you're sick and things feel hopeless because you just keep getting sicker and you're waiting and waiting on that transplant list, talking to someone who also got very sick and has then had their transplant, and it's like an example of something to reach for, and it is possible. This does happen. I can get better. I can get healthy again through transplantation. It really does happen, because there are times when you're sick, and when I observe patients being sick in the waiting phase, it's very difficult. People can lose hope quite easily.
So if, like myself, I can't be a mentor, but how else can others get involved in Gift of Life?
Well, I would say as a small nonprofit, we are always looking for financial support, which is another reason why we come to conferences like this, to network. And as people say to us, oh my gosh, you're doing such great work, we say to them, we need your support. So again, you can go on our website, giftdonor.org, and there's a Help Now button towards the top, and you can financially contribute to what we're doing. If any of our work seems interesting, we also have an adult education program. If you work for an employer that has like a lunch and learn style thing, this is something we did at y'all's office in the Kansas City area. We're so lucky to have a lab there, a ViraCore lab, and we, of course, Michelle is on our board, and so we get lots of support. But it's really cool to be able to go into an environment and give our Lifesavers presentation to an adult audience. Again, that presentation is talking about what it means to be an organ, eye, and tissue donor, how that process works, and encouraging people to have a conversation. And then someone will tell their very personal transplant story. I think sometimes when we are engaged in all the medicine and the sales and the this and the that, we forget what we're working for, right? You forget that there are people having their lives saved and changed every day as a result of our work. And so it really is a nice call to your mission to say, like, okay, let's remember what all this is about. And have the opportunity to have a presentation that is, high quality, and we love to interact with people who are out in the community and encourage them to have that conversation. Think about what it means to be an organ donor. Let people around you know how you feel about it, what you've learned, and how you intend to move forward.
Improving lives.
Yes.
That's what we do. That's what y'all do. I'm so thankful for the work. It's great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
It's exciting to hear about it a little bit more deeply, what you do as the director of mentorship, and the idea that somebody can come along, someone, and give them real world, real life, as you've said, in the wild advice about how this really goes down.
It's truly our pleasure to facilitate these connections.
Well, thanks, Patty, for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you.
Hope you have a great rest of World Transplant Conference.
Thank you, you as well.
Very nice meeting with you.
You too.
Take care.
Yeah.
Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all the latest information. If you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends and colleagues to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Podbean, and more. With over 40 years of diagnostic innovation and specialized expertise in infectious disease, pre- and post-transplant, allergy and immunology testing for immunocompromised and critical patients, Eurofins ViraCore is committed to helping medical professionals, transplant teams, and reference labs get results faster when it matters most. ViraCore is passionate about delivering value to our clients by providing timely, actionable information, never losing sight of the connection between the testing we perform and the patients you serve.